Good day, class. This is week 5, and I am Sir MJ. Welcome to our class. So last time in music class, we discovered the 20th century music. We've also learned that Impressionism was based on art movement started by the 19th century, that is a Paris-based virtual artist. Specifically, Claude Monet through his painting called Impressionism Sunrise. Some of the famous composers from the 20th century Impressionism style were Claude Debussy, who is one of the most important and influential composer of the 20th century. Now, for week 5 of our discussion, we are now going to discuss the second musical style of the 20th century, which is Expressionism. So for your information class, the term Expressionism was originally borrowed from visual art and literature. Artists created the vivid pictures, distorting colors and shapes to make unrealistic images that suggested strong emotions. What is the meaning of Expressionism? Expressionism class is the term generally used to describe music composed between the abandonment of tonality at the conclusion of the Romantic period and Arnold Schoenberg's creation of 12-tone composition. Unlike Impressionism class, Expressionism is more serious and psychological. Arnold Schoenberg class, born on the year 1874 and died on the year 1951. He is the primary exponent of Expressionism. He was born in a working-class suburb in Vienna, Austria on September 13 in 1874. Richard Wagner influenced him. His style class was constantly undergoing development. From the early influences of Wagner, his music gradually turned to the dissonant and atonal as he explored the use of chromatic harmonies. Schoenberg is credited with the establishment of the 12-tone system. His works include the following. The first one is Verklarte Nacht, which is a 3 pieces for a piano, option 11. We have Pierrot Lunaire, the Gorelieder, the Verklarte Nacht, or the Transfigured Night in 1899. One of his earliest successful pieces blends the lyricism, instrumentation, and melodic beauty of Brahms with the chromatism and construction of Wagner. The next artist is Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky's early music class reflected the influence of his teacher, the Russian composer Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. He adopted the form of the 18th century with his contemporary style of writing. Despite of its shocking modernity, his music is also very structured, precise, controlled, full of artifice and theatricality. His works class include the Firebird Suite in 1910. Composed for Digilev's Russian ballet, his skillful handling of material and rhythmic inventiveness went beyond anything composed by his Russian predecessors. The Rite of Spring in 1913 was another outstanding work. A new level of dissonance was reached and the sense of tonality was practically abandoned. Asymmetrical rhythms successfully portrayed the character of solemn pagan rite. The third composition was Petrochka, which was created in 1911, featuring the shift rhythms and polytonality as signature device of a composer. Fourth, we have The Rake's Progress in 1951. It is a full-length opera, alludes heavily to the Baroque and classical styles of Bach and Mozart through the use of the harpsichord, small orchestra, solo ensemble numbers, with recitative stringing together the different songs. Now let's proceed, class, with other musical style, starting with Primitivism. Primitivism music class is atonal through the asserting of one note as more important than the others. New sounds are synthesized from old ones by juxtaposing two simple events to create a more complex new event. The artist under this musical style is Bela Bartok. Bela Bartok class was one of the classic composers of the 20th century. He is the greatest Hungarian composer besides Liszt. As an ethnomusicologist class, he, together with Kodai, laid the foundations for the collection of Hungarian folk music. With the Romanian and Slovak collections, Bartok placed the national task at an early stage into the context of a comparative music folklore. His works includes the six-string quartets in 1908 and finished at the year 1938. It represents the greatest achievement of his creative life, spanning a full 30 years for their completion. The six works combine difficult and dissonant music with mysterious sounds. The second one is the Concerto for Orchestra in 1943. A five-movement work composed late in Bartok's life, features the exceptional talents of its various soloists in an intricately constructed piece. The third one is the short and popular Allegro Barbaro in 1911. For solo piano is punctuated with swirling rhythms and percussive chords. Number 4 is Mikrokosmos in 1926 and finished in the year 1939. It is a set of 6 books containing progressive technical piano pieces, introduced and familiarized the piano student with contemporary harmony and rhythm. The next musical style for 20th century class is what we call Neoclassicism. It was a moderating factor between the emotional excesses of the Romantic period and the violent impulses of the soul in Expressionism. It was in essence a partial return to an earlier style of writing while combining atonal harmonies with slight dissonances. The first artist for this musical style is Serge Prokofiev. He is a Russian composer who finished his 7th Symphony in 1952. Written for young listeners at the end of a tragic and repressive Stalinist era, it is often criticized as a simplistic or banal. His contacts with Diaghilev and Stravinsky gave him the chance to write music for the ballet and opera, notably the ballet Romeo and Juliet and the opera of War and Peace. Much of Prokofiev's opera was left unfinished, due in part to resistance by the performers themselves to the seemingly offensive musical content. He became prolific in writing symphonies, chamber music, concerti, and solo instrumental music. He also wrote Peter and the Wolf, a light-hearted orchestral work intended for children, to appease the continuing government crackdown on avant-garde composers at the time. The second composer for Neoclassicism is Francis Poulenc. He is one of the relatively few composers born into wealth and a privileged social position. The neoclassicist Francis Jean-Marcel Poulenc was a member of the group of a young French composer known as the Les Six. He rejected the heavy romanticism of Wagner and the so-called imprecision of Debussy and Ravel. His compositions had a coolly elegant modernity, tempered by a classical sense of proportion. Poulenc was also fond of the witty approach of Satie, as well as the early neoclassical work of Stravinsky. Poulenc was a successful composer for piano, voice, and choral music. His output included the harpsichord concerto known as Concert Champerty in 1928, the Concerto for 2 pianos in 1932, which combined the classical touches of Mozart with the refreshing mixtures of wit and exoticism in the style of Ravel, and a concerto for solo piano in 1949, written for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Poulenc's vocal output, meanwhile, revealed his strength as a lyrical melodist. His opera works included Les Mamelues de Tereshas in 1944, which revealed his light-hearted character, Dialogue de Carmelites in 1956. The third musical style of the 20th century class is avant-garde music. It is a style was associated with electronic music and dealt with the parameters of dimensions of sound in space. It made use of variation of self-contained note groups to change musical continuity and improvisation, with an absence of the traditional rules of harmony, melody, and rhythm. The first composer of this musical style is George Gershwin. Gershwin came from the family of Russian Jewish immigrants. Although the family was not musically inclined, George showed an interest in music when he was about 10. In 1918 and 1919, his work began appearing in Broadway productions like La La Lucille, a musical farce. His opera Porgy and Bess in 1934 remains to this day the only American opera to be included in the established repertoire of this genre. In spite of his commercial success, Gershwin was more fascinated with classical music. He was influenced by Ravel, Stravinsky, Berg, and Schoenberg, as well as the group of the contemporary French composers known as Les Six, that would shape the character of his major works, half jazz and half classical. Gershwin's melodic gift was considered phenomenal. As evidenced by his numerous songs of wide appeal, he is a true crossover artist, in the sense that his serious compositions remain highly popular in the classical repertoire, as his stage and film songs continue to be jazz and vocal standards. Considered the father of American jazz, his mixture of the primitive and the sophisticated gave his music an appeal that has lasted long after his death. His musical compositions total around 369, which include orchestral music, chamber music, musical theater, film musicals, operas, and songs. He died in Hollywood, California, USA on July 11, 1937. The next artist under Avantgarde is Leonard Bernstein. He was born in Massachusetts, USA. He endeared himself to his many followers as a charismatic conductor, pianist, composer, and lecturer. His big break came when he was asked to substitute for the ailing Bruno Walter in the conducting the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in the concert on November 14, 1943. His philosophy was that the universal language of music is basically rooted in tonality. Bernstein is best known for his compositions for the stage. Foremost among this is the musical West Side Story in 1957, American version of Romeo and Juliet, which displays a toneful, offbeat, and highly atonal approach to the songs. Other outputs include another Broadway hit, Candide, in 1956, and the much-celebrated Mass in 1971, which he wrote for the opening of John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. He composed the music for the film On the Waterfront in 1954. As a lecturer, Bernstein is fondly remembered for his television series Young People's Concerts in 1958 to 1973 that demonstrated the sounds of the various orchestral instruments and explained basic music principles to young audiences, as well as his Harvardian lecturers. A 6-volume set of his papers on syntax, musical theories, and philosophical insights delivered to his students at Harvard University. His musical compositions total around 90. He died in New York City, USA on October 14, 1990. Next composer is Philip Glass, who was born on 1937. He is one of the most commercially successful minimalist composer is Philip Glass, who is also an avant-garde composer. He explored the territories of ballet, opera, theater, film, and even television jingles. His distinctive style involves a cell-like phrases emanating from bright electronic sounds from the keyboard that progress very slowly from one pattern to the next in a very repetitious fashion. Aided by soothing vocal effects and horn sounds, his music is often criticized as uneventful and shallow, yet startlingly effective for its hypnotic charm. The last musical style of the 20th century is modern nationalism. It is a looser form of 20th century music development focused on nationalist composers and musical innovators who sought to combine modern techniques with folk materials. The first composer for this musical style is Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. In Eastern Europe, prominent figures included the Hungarian Bela Bartok and the Russian Sergei Prokofiev, who were neoclassicists to a certain extent. Bartok infused classical techniques into his own brand of cross rhythms and shifting meters to demonstrate many barbaric and primitive themes that were Hungarian, particularly gypsy in origin.